Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into a massive what if. Think about the invisible infrastructure that surrounds us literally every single day. We walk through it, we breathe it in, we rely on it to run pretty much our entire modern world, but we never actually see it. So, what if that changed? What if the hidden architecture of our wireless reality suddenly made itself known to our own eyes? Let's break down exactly what that would look like.
It's a simple question, right? But the implications are just staggering. Seriously, what if you could actually see Wi-Fi? Imagine, just for a second, if the invisible electromagnetic waves bouncing off our bodies and passing right through the walls of our homes suddenly became this permanent, visible layer of our everyday reality. We wouldn't just be looking at the physical world anymore, the bricks, the trees, the pavement. No, we'd be staring directly at the raw data that powers the entire globe.
So, move into Section 1, an ocean of digital light, seeing the data that powers the world. If this biological switch were just suddenly flipped, the very air around us wouldn't look like empty space anymore. Actually, scratch that. The whole concept of thin air would just vanish entirely. Instead, our source text points out that the world would instantly transform into a hyper-saturated kaleidoscope of pure light. Everywhere you look, there'd be this swirling, glowing ocean of digital energy. And it wouldn't be standing still either. This environment would be constantly pulsating with all sorts of different colors, varying intensities, and rapid motion as data zips from point A to point B.
Which brings us to Section 2, the glowing smart home, or the microview.
Okay, let's start small. Think about what happens inside a standard modern home. Your everyday Wi-Fi router, that little plastic box tucked away in the corner, would suddenly act like a brilliant, glowing orb. It would cast a gentle, constant luminescence throughout your whole house. You'd physically see these distinct data beams. Picture them rendered in vibrant blues and purples, just surging out from that router and passing effortlessly straight through your drywall. Your smartphone, your laptop, your smart TV, they'd all look like they were physically tethered right to the router by these glowing streams of light.
And the visual feedback? It would be instantaneous. Like every time you downloaded a massive file or started streaming a 4K video on your TV, you'd literally watch that specific glowing stream of light suddenly brighten and pulse like crazy. It's kind of wild to think that you could visually monitor your network's high-velocity data transfers just by kicking back on the couch and watching the light pulse and dance across your living room ceiling.
Now, let's zoom out to Section 3, Cityscape, a neon thunderstorm, the macro view.
Because if you stepped outside into a major city, wow, you'd be hit with a sensory overload of apocalyptic proportions. The open air would be incredibly thick with overlapping waves of radiation. Those massive cellular towers wouldn't just be boring metal structures anymore. They'd be shooting towering, multi-kilometer-wide beams of light high up into the sky. And down on the sidewalk, thousands of individual pedestrian smartphones would be emitting these localized, faint auroras of connectivity. Mix in the public Wi-Fi networks, the Bluetooth signals from everyone's wireless headphones, maybe some satellite downlinks, and you're basically left wading through a dense, multicolored fog of data.
Honestly, a simple walk down a busy street would literally feel like pushing your way through a neon thunderstorm. And what's really fascinating here is that different frequencies would actually have completely distinct visual signatures. You could visually spot the difference between the softer, rolling waves of your standard Wi-Fi signal and the ultra-fast, shorter-range waves of 5G networks. The 5G would look like sharp, bright, geometric grids just cutting violently right through the softer background radiation.
Let's look at Section 4, seeing cybersecurity and dead zones, revolutionizing human behavior. Now, here's where it gets pretty practical. Annoying dead zones where your internet just drops, they wouldn't be a frustrating mystery anymore. You'd simply spot the visual shadow being cast by, say, a thick concrete wall blocking the signal, and you just physically step out of that shadow. You'd move directly into the bright stream of data light to get your perfect connection back. Basically, troubleshooting your internet would just become a matter of standing in the light. How easy is that?
But what's truly a game changer is how our whole concept of cybersecurity would flip on its head. It would take on a completely physical form. You wouldn't need fancy, complex software to know if you were being hacked at the local coffee shop. Nope. You'd be able to visually detect a stranger's laptop actively attempting to intercept or even physically touch the glowing data stream radiating from your personal device. Digital theft would suddenly become as obvious as someone reaching their hand right into your pocket.
All right, moving to Section 5, the death of true darkness and the psychological toll.
20. I want you to really think about that number for a second. In a typical apartment building or a crowded neighborhood, you might be in range of 20 different neighboring Wi-Fi networks at any given time. Right now, they pass right through your walls completely invisibly. But if we could see them? The ambient glow of 20 overlapping networks, cutting straight through your bedroom walls, would mean that true darkness would effectively cease to exist in populated areas. Even with your eyes shut, completely tight, the sheer brightness penetrating your room would make getting a good night's sleep just incredibly difficult.
And hey, the impact goes way beyond just losing some sleep. The human brain would face severe, constant cognitive fatigue. You see, you wouldn't just be looking at pretty lights. You'd be seeing the endless, irrelevant background noise of the entire digital age. Every spam email, every single random social media notification, and all the mundane web traffic of millions of people literally flying through the air around you. Your brain would have to work absolute overtime just trying to filter out a constant visual barrage of data that has absolutely nothing to do with you.
Because of all that, humanity would have to adapt pretty dramatically just to find some peace. We'd likely see a massive migration of people fleeing these neon cities, heading for rural radio-quiet zones, places completely devoid of signal just to get a little bit of visual silence. And for those who couldn't pack up and leave the cities, well, the very architecture of our homes would have to change. We'd be forced to build heavily shielded, metal-lined dark rooms. Essentially, we'd be living in Faraday cages, just to block out the light and experience a few hours of absolute sensory relief.
There's a quote from our source text that brings this whole thought experiment into perfect focus. It says, proving that sometimes the greatest luxury is what remains unseen. It hits the nail on the head, right? It brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway here. While the idea of seeing the digital world sounds like this cool, magical superpower at first, the invisible nature of our data is actually a hidden blessing. It's the only thing protecting our sanity.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. Knowing the reality of it all, knowing the chaotic, beautiful, completely exhausting neon reality that powers our devices every second of the day, if you had the power, would you actually choose to flip the switch and see it? Or are you, maybe like me, suddenly feeling very, very grateful to just stay safely in the dark? Definitely something to chew on the next time you connect to your Wi-Fi. Thanks so much for exploring this luminous architecture with me today on This Explainer. Until next time, stay curious.